Hola, bienvenidos to another episode of Radio Pulso. My name is Kevin Martinez, and I will be co-hosting today with Kate Valdez. How are you doing today, Kate?
Hi, Kevin. I'm doing really well. It feels so good to be back as we welcome summer. Not excited about this summer heat, but you
For
know
real.
how it gets in LA.
Yeah, definitely. It's gonna be a very hot summer. But yeah, just very quickly, we want our audience to know that we are a radio program and podcast brought to you by the community news outlet Boyle Heights Beat. This is a program that trains local high school students to publish a community newspaper, and it also produces its very own podcast. So, what do we have going on today, Kate?
Well, as I'm sure many of y'all know, June is actually Pride Month. So, in lieu of that, we will be highlighting Pride for this episode. So, on that note, Kevin, what do you usually do for Pride? What does that month look like for you?
Well, my birthday is in June.
A
So I always start obviously the first week of June celebrating my birthday. It's on June 3rd. In addition to that, like I actually attended my first Pride this month, uh, like in LA. This past weekend, I was at the Boyle Heights Pride event at the first one in I think ever, right?
Yeah, it was the first annual Pride Fest. That
Yeah,
was pretty exciting.
I did that this year, and then I've been wanting to go to a Pride in LA since I moved back to LA, but then the pandemic hit. But yeah, I mean, my first Pride ever was in Salt Lake City, Utah, where I used to live, where I went to school, and it was interesting. It
How
was
did that
interesting.
compare to just this Boyle Heights first annual
Oh,
Pride Fest?
I mean, Salt Lake City, it's a predominantly white city and state, so you can imagine, right? Like it was just, uh, um, yeah, it was just this the ambiance, just the celebration just felt different,
Of course.
and I mean it was cool, right? For it being my first Pride, it was fun, but yeah, definitely, uh, in comparison to the one in Boyle Heights, it just seemed like I was more in community, more like at home,
Of
with
course, no,
like
yeah.
yeah, it was just a different vibe overall.
For sure.
What about you?
Oh, well, I myself have actually never been to a Pride event. For some reason, I've always wanted to like make my way out, especially in the month of June, either to like WeHo. Um, I regret not going to the Boyle Heights one because I always think to myself like, hey, like WeHo always has something going on right for the entire month of June. But I kind of thought how it was unfortunate that Boyle Heights didn't have its own Pride Fest. So when I heard about it, I was like, that sounds like really, really cool. Um, but I had other plans. That always happens, right? Like I always want to make my way out, but it just doesn't go through. But actually, Saturday night I went to this. It was like a sort of like a Pride event slash like summer event at the Broad. It was basically like a compilation of performances from folks that identify as LGBTQI plus. Um, it was like an open mic. One of them was a poet. Other people were just like musicians. All artists, right? And then the exhibits were actually open, like themselves. So the event was from 8 to 11 p.m. So it was really cool spending time at a museum after hours, And they had like alcohol and
Oh,
beer
that
and
sounds
wine.
fun.
Yeah, and I just went with my girlfriend, and she was the one that actually invited me. And I was like, yeah, like let's do it. Like I've never actually done a Pride event like that. So it was actually my first since forever. I've never actually done anything like that. And it was just something new, it was like a new experience, which I always welcome. I'm always open to trying something, and I think we were just both. I don't know. It was a little bit different. We felt a little bit out of our comfort zone, only because maybe we both have never been to an event like that where the
Mm.
energy is like really palpable, right? And it's a little
Mm-hmm.
bit different to what we're used to. But like I said, it's always nice to get out of your shell a little bit and just experience new things.
Yeah.
But yeah, all in all, it was like really exciting, and I really liked being able to spend time in a museum after hours. I think that was the biggest, the biggest takeaway for me. Um,
That sounds really cool.
yeah,
Was it also the first time for your partner to like be
it was.
at an event
Yeah,
like that?
yeah. So she just recently moved to LA, right? So she had I mean, the scene where she lived originally, it was nothing like LA. So it was definitely her first time too. Yeah,
Oh wow,
yeah.
that sounds fun.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. they will have the events like over the course of the summer, so it's like a
Mm.
3-day thing, and that Saturday was the first day for the rest of it. Um, but yeah, I mean, June's not over yet, so
Right.
hopefully I can make my way out to another Pride Fest, whether it's here in LA or WeHo or San Diego, whatever it might be.
I did hear that there's one in July happening in Long Beach
In Long
or
Beach.
something like the first week of July.
Interesting. I might make my way
Yeah,
out there. Yeah.
I heard. I
I
haven't looked
love
into
Long
it.
Beach. Yeah, I feel like the energy and the community over there is like really great. It kind
Yeah,
of like, I feel like it could easily be Boyle Heights, so
yeah, it's a little
I could see
diverse.
myself enjoying it. Yeah.
Hmm.
So on that note, for this episode, we will be highlighting and honoring queer and trans folks in the community. Today, we will be interviewing youth activists for the Latinx LGBTQIA plus community, Alex Medina. Alex Medina is a 2018 alumnus of the Boyle Heights B and recent 2022 graduate of Hamilton College in upstate New York. During his youth and time as a student at Bravo Medical Magnet High School in Boyle Heights, Alex served as an activist for the Latinx LGBTQIA plus community through organizations such as Latino Equality Alliance, the Gender and Sexuality Alliance Network, and the LA LGBT Center. Now, back in Boyle Heights, Alex hopes to continue growing as a journalist and activist by becoming a mentor for youth in the community to give back and offer the same support he received growing up. So, with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Alex, who is here with us today. Thank you so much for joining us to highlight Pride Month. So, let's jump right into it. How are you, Alex?
Well, I'm doing well. It's nice to be home, back in LA, and enjoying the weather.
That's great to hear. So, we're going to jump into this interview, and Kevin, you can go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, welcome, Alex. Nice to finally meet you. I've heard great things about you. So, with the first question that we have is, how do you self-identify?
So I identify as a gay man who is also Latino. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And can you share a little bit about like what does pride mean to you? Like how do you, how have you yeah like how do you embrace it, or like yeah overall like how has it meant for you?
Yeah, pride means a lot of different things for me. I feel like it really depends on the context I'm in, especially because the community, the LGBT community and also the Latino community and just every community, I feel like there's like a lot of different things that affect how you present yourself and how you experience a certain space. So I feel like it depends on the context I'm in. Like when it comes to, well, pride during June or pride in general, as like when I'm celebrating my identity as a gay man, I feel like it really represents kind of like just being yourself, and kind of feel like as someone with intersectional identities, I feel like how I choose to embrace and how I experience like that aspect of my identity really depends on the spaces I'm in. And I feel like that like kind of like view of pride kind of came through my experiences growing up as a gay Latino man, which I feel like is unique in that most of the spaces that are queer identifying or like queer supportive spaces, I feel like are oftentimes predominantly white, especially in Los Angeles, which is the city I grew up in. So I feel like how I experience pride in those spaces is a lot different than I would in somewhere like Boyle Heights and East LA. But yeah, generally it's just being yourself and embracing who you are as a person, and just loving who you want to love.
Definitely. So I mean, lived in upstate New York. Um, did you ever had the opportunity to attend like a pride event over there, and like how was it? I mean, you mentioned how like even in LA it was super white, right? Like some of those events, like would you say if you did, well, first of all, did you have the chance to attend a pride event up there?
Not specifically, like I was involved with like the queer and trans group at my college, which at the time was called the Queer Student Union, but then we changed the name to the Gender and Sexuality Alliance, and before that it was known as the Rainbow Alliance. But even then, like in that space, it was predominantly white, and there was a lot of discourse in terms of like why queer and trans people of color didn't really feel comfortable in those sorts of spaces. And as someone who was a person of color in those spaces, there was like a lot of, I don't know, it was just complicated. But I feel like definitely speaking on that, I feel like yeah, it's not the same vibe in a sense, especially because like if it was like in New York City, I feel like it'd be similar to LA in terms of like West Hollywood Pride and like those spaces. But I feel like since it was in upstate New York, which is like a pretty conservative part of New York in my area was generally like very conservative. I feel like yeah, those spaces weren't as open, but the people in a sense were kind of. But yeah, I feel like at the college I was involved in those sorts of different groups and stuff.
So what was the like acclimation process like for you, experiencing those spaces? Like you said, like it was the vibes and the environment was a little bit different. So how did you acclimate moving away from your hometown, and going on to this new environment that's just a little bit different to what you're used to?
I feel like it took me a really long time to like adjust to those sorts of spaces, especially because like it's such a like a niche location, and like I'm pretty sure I was like one of 3 people from LA, and like even the people from LA that go to like those random colleges that yeah, I don't know how to explain it, but even people who were from LA who went to that school and are from LA who go to like different schools on like the East Coast, generally they're not really from East LA or Boyle Heights. They're like from West Hollywood, North Hollywood, or like there were some people that asked like, "Oh, where are you from?" And they're like LA, and I asked them where, and then they'd be like, "Oh, Orange County," and I'd be like, "Oh, okay."
Or like San Fernando Valley.
Yeah. We're like, well, actually, it's what's it called? Or Sacramento.
What?
I don't know.
That's not even LA.
I
They
don't.
have their geography wrong.
Yeah, but it just feel like, yeah, even like being from LA, it's like very unique in being from, well, like predominantly Black and Latinx communities in Los Angeles, because I feel like that's such a unique experience, and that kind of also goes into like being queer and a person of color. I feel like it's, yeah, so it just took a long time for me to adjust, and even then, like when I felt adjusted to those spaces, it felt like people still weren't adjusted to having me in those spaces, which definitely is like was a problem my full 4 years there, and even like up until like when my parents were there for my graduation, even they experienced that in a sense. So I feel like it's just really hard, and I feel like that's just like the experience of being a person of color in like predominantly white spaces in general, although I feel like things are getting better. It just feels like, yeah, it's just complicated, but I feel like that goes back into what I said about how I experience pride depending on the spaces.
The context of it,
Yep.
of course. Well, I just want to say, like, I mean, yeah, just hearing that, like, it really reiterates, like, what we already know, but hearing you say it, like, first-person narrative, like, it kind of just changes things for me, like, just listening to you talk about it. So I want to thank you for just being vulnerable, like, you know, like, right off the bat. You talked about your family a little bit, so I kind of want to ask, initially, how was the LGBTQIA community perceived in your family before, and how is it currently perceived within your family and your parents, or your immediate family at that?
So I feel like early on growing up, before I came out to my parents, which was around when I was 13, I think, it just generally wasn't talked about, but like in the spaces I was involved with, especially because I used to be like a monaguillo or an altar boy when I was little for like 8 years somehow. It was definitely seen as a negative thing in those spaces, in those religious spaces, but my parents never really commented on it or anything like that, or even like my family generally. There'd just be like, I feel like in a lot of Latino communities there's just generally words that are used that are just homophobic in general.
Yeah.
And even though like people may not express those views and may not like be homophobic or something, like even those words kind of like make you feel like they're homophobic in a sense. But I feel like generally my family just didn't really talk about it. But then when I came out, they were very supportive and stuff, and especially both of my parents, and they both told my siblings, and I have 2 brothers, 1 sister, and they've all been supportive of me since I came out and stuff. But yeah, and then they got super involved with the community and stuff, which I could talk more about.
Well, let's talk about it. Yeah. Okay. So, you say that your parents have gotten much more involved in the community ever since you came out to them. So, what does that look like?
Yeah, so it exactly goes into like my experience with Boyle Heights Beat in a sense, because like while I was out, like my parents like still weren't really involved in the community until I wrote a article for the Boyle Heights Beat. I believe it was my second one, about the Latino Equality Alliance and Mi Centro in Boyle Heights, which is like the LGBT center there. And after Eddie always has like the story about like my mom. It's like mad dramatic, but but it's also mad funny. Like she just like after she got the article that I wrote about the center and stuff, she just like pulled up to Mi Centro, and they were like, "Hola, cómo estás?" And then she just like had the article, and she was like, "Este es mi hijo," and yeah, that dramatic, but she just got involved with that, and then she got my parents, or she got she got my dad involved in the groups too and stuff, because there's this group called like PFLAG, which is or the acronym doesn't mean the same thing it used to, but it used to be parents and friends of lesbians and gays, but now it's just like PFLAG, just to be more general, and more supportive of like the community, or like the other aspect or the other identities within the community. And yeah, they got involved with that group, but even there, that kind of like was a predominantly white space. So then I know the group has like a subsection called PFLAG en Español, which is a more supportive towards like Latinx and Spanish speaking folks and things like that. So they got involved with those groups and started helping like other parents, especially like Latino parents, because there's like a lot of homophobia and machismo in the, or not always, but like generally I feel like
speaking,
there's a lot of that there. And I feel like that's something that was really impactful for me in terms of like feeling supported, because I knew that they were also helping like other families like become more accepting and like raising awareness around like what it means to be queer and trans and things like that. So I feel like yeah, they were just like, they just got super involved with that group, and through that they got involved with like other organizations predominantly helping like other parents like them and things like that. And they've been doing that since for a long time. Yeah, I think since I was 15, so it's been 7 years that they've been doing that. Yeah, they're very old.
That's awesome. Like, first, like, not only that your parents, you know, were accepting, right, of you, but also that they took that step to like learn more about it, and like ultimately become activists themselves, and like educate other parents, right, on the importance of accepting and just like embrace, and yeah, just like being supportive of it. So like I think that's like a model to follow like other
Definitely,
parents,
yeah.
right? It's like, one thing is to, yes, like accept your own family, but also like taking that next step and like educate others on just this concept, right? That I feel like there's a lot of like myths, right, false information, and I just want to commend your parents for that. That's awesome.
Gracias.
I'm really curious to know more about your experience with like Mi Centro, and like, I mean, you were heavily involved with Lea and the LGBT Center, but like, what, like, how did those spaces, you mentioned Eddie earlier, like how did those I guess, yeah, community spaces help you, right, in feeling safe and feeling perhaps empowered to embrace your identity and also be an activist?
Yeah, so I definitely feel like in terms of like having an intersectional space like Mi Centro, which is predominant, or just in general for Latino, queer, and trans folks, I feel like that was something that was affirming in terms of like, because I was involved in those spaces before I went to Mi Centro, but like I mentioned earlier, that they were predominantly white, and the experiences there are like very different, I feel like, depending on, or the other intersectional identities you have as a person. So I feel like having a space that was specifically made to cater towards, or like be supportive of like the unique needs of Latino, queer, and trans folks, I feel like that was something that was really affirming, and also something that I felt like highlighted the need to address like the unique issues that come with being or the unique issues that face like queer and trans Latinos and Latinas and Latinx folks in general. Yeah, so it was very affirming in that sense, and I feel like the different things I did within that space also helped me to help other youth like me, and other folks who were going through similar things as me, and like bring that work from that space into my own high school and like different spaces, and kind of like expand on that to be able to support more people, because my experience was like, or like with having supportive parents, I feel like I was able to do more with my identity to like support other people who might not have had supportive parents.
Thank you for sharing. I guess a follow-up question is, in terms of like your friends, right, like your circle of friends, how did you feel supported by them, right? And yeah, like what was that like?
What kind of changes as I got older and stuff, because I feel like when I was younger, folks definitely weren't accepting, but I feel like that was more towards like the awareness aspect of thing. Like I feel like when I was, I think in middle school, before I came out to my friends, like I had a lot of friends who just stopped hanging out with me because they were like, oh, you're gonna turn us gay, which is again like going into like misconceptions around the community and stuff like that. And I feel like but yeah, later on I just feel like generally over the past 10 years, and especially with like the passing of like gay marriage, which was again like 7 years ago, it wasn't too long ago, I feel like awareness around the community has definitely changed. And like considering the type of people I tend to surround myself with, I feel like folks are or yeah, just accepting in general, and that aspect of my identity doesn't really like go into how we are as friends, because like I said, it's just like one aspect of my identity, and it's not really something that goes into like conversations really. It's like a
It's just part of it, right?
yeah, just like a part of
not,
my identity and
of
stuff.
course.
And I feel like yeah, people just generally are accepting, and they're just like, especially during Pride Month, yay. Yeah, I feel like folks are just generally supportive, especially like out there in the community. I feel like not always, but they're probably going to be supportive. And then straight allies, I feel like, are supportive, yeah, just by treating me like a normal person, I feel. Yeah.
You pointed out like straight allies, so I kind of want to get in. I kind of want to get deeper into that. So my question is, what are some ways that an individual who identifies as straight can be an ally to the LGBTQIA plus community?
Yeah, so I feel like being an ally and being accepting are like two very different things. 'Cause I feel like generally like everyone just should be accepting, but being an ally, like I feel like allyship is more of like an action in terms of like well, kind of like spreading that acceptance to like folks who might not be accepting, or just standing up for folks whenever there's a situation where someone might be feeling uncomfortable, or just generally like doing things that are generally supportive. I feel like I like respecting people's pronouns, and kind of just like making it clear that certain spaces are like supportive of queer and trans folks. And yeah, and I feel like just highlighting or making sure that certain issues revolving around the community are like brought up, and that there is awareness around that. And generally, not always, but like for folks with money, there's like ways to donate that money to organizations that are supportive of the community, even though capitalism and rainbow capitalism kind of gets a little complicated.
Most
But
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, I feel like what you shared with us about your parents, like I think that that's like the epitome of what a perfect ally looks like. You know, like just taking initiative, educating yourself, holding those safe spaces, right, with other Latinx parents, to have these difficult conversations and make sure that you're creating a safe space for your child, right? So yeah, definitely. So with all your previous work that you've done as a youth activist back when you were still in Boyle Heights, the last used LA, and now that you've graduated college, what impact do you ultimately hope to have in the LGBTQIA plus community?
So I feel like as someone who is like not really a youth anymore and more of like an adult, I definitely feel like I want to be supportive of other or be supportive of more of like the younger generation of queer and trans folks, especially in like certain spaces, because I feel like even though things are getting better, there are still like a lot of folks who have like a very negative experience when it comes to how they experience the world, especially when it comes to being intersectional, being like Latino and queer and trans and things like that. So I feel like I definitely want to serve as like more of a mentor and give back to folks who are getting involved in those spaces that I was involved in when I was younger and things like that. And I also feel like something even though the issue is like really complicated, I feel like helping to try addressing homelessness in terms of, I'm not sure how I'm gonna help with that, but that's generally something I want to do, because I feel like or I know that a lot of youth who are homeless are queer and trans predominantly. I believe it's like over half, and especially in LA, and I feel like that's predominantly an issue relating to acceptance in homes and family, or in homes, yeah, especially in like Latino homes, and or just any people of color homes. I feel like the experience there is a lot different, and oftentimes like people get kicked out of their homes, and that's why there's a lot of queer and trans homeless youth in Los Angeles and stuff. So I feel like that's something I definitely want to try helping out with, and I feel like the LA LGBT Center has sort of been kind of ish leaning towards addressing that issue. I know they have like a center in West Hollywood, that's a housing center to kind of like help folks who are young and part of the LGBTQI plus community kind of get back on their feet and provide like housing for them, and also provide an opportunity to work for them. So I feel like that's something I definitely want to get involved with, because that's an issue that I've noticed a lot, and an issue that yeah, it's just a big issue that I want to help out with, and yeah, just giving back to the community and being a mentor. I feel like that's something I want to hopefully do.
Well, is there anything that you would like to add? Um, as I mean, we've covered a wide range of
Topics and
topics,
themes. Yeah.
experiences. But as we reach kind of like the end of the interview, is there anything that you would like to add and share with our audience members?
Happy Pride. I don't know. No, just be who you are, and yeah, just be who you are, and yeah, and always feel comfortable being yourself in whatever space you're in, even if other folks aren't comfortable with you there. Yeah. Yeah. Happy Pride. Feliz Orgullo.
Well, that's the perfect way to end this interview. It's very touching. So thank you so much for joining us, Alex. We really appreciate, like I said earlier, you sharing and being vulnerable with all of us here, sharing your experiences and your insights and challenges that's come with your self-identity. So we really appreciate you being here with us. Well, that's a wrap for our Radio Pulso podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Kate Valdez.
And I'm Kevin Martinez. If you want to pitch us an idea for the radio show or our newspapers, send us an email at boyheightsbeat@gmail.com. That's boyheightsbeat@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from all of you as we pride ourselves in offering noticias por y para la comunidad, or we'd even love to have you on our show. Also, make sure to check us out on social media to stay up to date. You can follow our Radio Pulso IG account at Radio Pulso, that's triple R, Radio Pulso.
And thanks to the people who make Boyle Heights be possible, especially Chris Kelly and Antonio Mejias Rentas. A huge thank you to our radio producer, Jackie Ramirez, who also engineered our show today. You'll hear from us next in July, so please don't forget to tune in. Until then, suerte Boyle Heights. Nos vemos en la calle.